Architects that Changed the World Chapter 1. Introduction to World-Changing Architecture. Picture this. The towering spires of a Gothic cathedral, sunlight streaming through stained glass. Or perhaps you envision the sleek, modern skyscrapers defining a city skyline. Maybe your heart quickens at the sight of ancient temples carved into mountainsides. Whatever your vision, architecture has a power all its own. Buildings, you might say, they're just places to live and work. And they are, of course. But architecture is so much more than bricks and mortar, glass and steel. It's the art and science of shaping the very spaces where our lives unfold. Great architects aren't just designers, they're world builders in the truest sense. Think about it for a moment. Architecture leaves its mark on history. We remember the Roman Empire through the Colosseum, Egypt through its pyramids, the Renaissance through the grand cathedrals of Europe. We even judge the success of civilizations, in part, by the structures they left behind. These buildings tell us stories of power, of faith, of innovation, and of everyday human lives that unfolded within their walls centuries ago. Architecture reflects the world around it, but the best architecture doesn't just memorialize the past, does it? It speaks to us right here, right now. A great building understands the needs of its time, reflects the culture it springs from, and even pushes boundaries. Just imagine the Sydney Opera House. Can you picture anything else taking its place on that harbor? Its shell-like forms almost melt into the sea and sky, the perfect embodiment of its setting. Yet, when it was built, its design was wildly ahead of its time, making engineering leaps to make its curves possible. Or think about the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain, a swirling, shimmering mass of titanium. That building didn't just house art, it became art, revitalizing a once struggling industrial city, changing the way we think about what a museum can be. Architecture has a voice, and it speaks to us in countless ways. Problem solving. Whether building shelters in harsh climates or designing complex hospitals, architects solve some of humanity's biggest challenges with ingenuity. Emotion. Buildings evoke feelings: awe at a skyscraper, cozy warmth from a traditional home, serenity within a place of worship. Sustainability. Architects are finding ever more innovative ways to build beautifully while minimizing impact on our planet. Community. From bustling city plazas to peaceful libraries, well-designed public spaces bring people together and shape how we interact with one another. The architects behind the architecture. So, who are these world changers? That's the story this book will explore. You'll meet legends like I.M. Pei, who gave us iconic glass pyramids and bold geometric statements. You'll dive into the mind of Frank Lloyd Wright, who brought nature indoors, blurring the lines between buildings and their landscapes. There's Zaha Hadid, whose flowing, futuristic shapes pushed architecture into wholly new territory. And we won't just look at the past. We'll explore cutting-edge architects who are reshaping concepts of sustainability and community with their designs. Some of these figures will be names you know, while others may surprise you. One thing's for sure, they all possess a creative vision that transcended the mere need for buildings. An invitation, of course. You don't need to be an expert to appreciate the wonders of architecture. We all interact with buildings every day. This book is an invitation to do that a little more mindfully. I want you to start noticing things like light and space, form and material, how they make you feel. And I want you to start wondering, why is that building shaped like that? What was the architect thinking? Because when you peel back the layers of what goes into our built environment, you begin to discover the power architecture holds. It shapes our cities, creates our cultural landmarks, and yes, it can even change the world. Join me on this journey, and let's explore the architects who dared to make their dreams into tangible, inspiring realities. Chapter 2. Imhotep, the first architect. Let's turn the clock way back. Imagine ancient Egypt, with its shimmering Nile, the blazing sun, and those iconic pyramids towering over the sand. That's where our story begins, with a man named Imhotep. Okay, confession time. We don't know a ton of specifics about his life. He lived around 2600 BC, so the details get a little fuzzy. But here's the amazing part. Imhotep is often considered the very first architect in history whose name we actually know. Imagine the pressure. You build something, and thousands of years later, people are still talking about you. Now, Imhotep wasn't just an architect. Talk about an overachiever. He was like the Renaissance man of ancient Egypt, a vizier, think prime minister, to Pharaoh Djoser, a priest, a scribe, a healer, maybe even an astronomer. Clearly, this guy had way too much free time. But his most famous legacy lies in stone. The Step Pyramid. A tomb for eternity. Picture how Egyptians buried their pharaohs before Imhotep. They built mastabas, basically flat-topped, rectangular tombs. Functional? Sure. Impressive? Meh, not really. Then along comes Imhotep with an idea that basically changes the architectural game. Let's stack a bunch of mastabas on top of each other, but make them smaller as we go up. And voila, the Step Pyramid is born. It might seem simple, but remember, no one had done anything like this before. Imhotep was inventing a whole new way to honor the dead, and it wasn't just about design. This pyramid was a statement of power and ambition for Pharaoh Djoser. It quite literally raised him above everyone else, even in the afterlife. Beyond bricks and mortar, but Imhotep wasn't just some master mason, he transformed the way buildings were even made. Before him, Egyptians mostly used mud brick. Imhotep's like, let's think bigger. He starts using huge blocks of stone, a more challenging but way more durable material. It's a leap in engineering and a nod to creating something meant to last for eternity. And here's where things get even more fascinating. Imhotep himself becomes legendary. After his death, he's elevated, becoming a god of medicine and healing. Think about it, that's like a modern architect being worshipped for centuries. Clearly, the Egyptians thought this guy was special. Imhotep's legacy, so why should we care about some dusty pyramid builder from thousands of years ago? Here's the thing. Imhotep set the stage for so much that followed, and not just in Egypt. The rise of pyramids. Yeah, those famous smooth-sided pyramids? You wouldn't have those without Imhotep's stepped experiment. He kicks off an architectural obsession in Egypt. Monumental architecture. The Step Pyramid showed just how awe-inspiring a building could be. It's about power, about leaving a lasting mark on the world. It inspires pharaohs and empires for ages to come. The architect is visionary. Before Imhotep, we don't really hear about individual builders and their ideas. He paves the way for architects to be seen not just as skilled laborers, but as thinkers whose designs shape civilizations. Now, did Imhotep single-handedly invent every technique or have all the ideas completely on his own? Probably not. But he seems to have been the visionary leader driving a wave of innovation that echoed for millennia. Looking for answers in the sand, imagine yourself standing in the shadow of Imhotep's pyramid. It's battered, sure, but still massively impressive. You can almost feel the weight of centuries pressing down on you. This building, this architect, reminds us just how powerful the built environment can be. It makes us want to understand the mind of the person who dreamt it all up, and that is how a figure like Imhotep continues to inspire architects, and all of us, even today. Chapter 3. Vitruvius defining classical architecture. Let's shift our focus from the sands of Egypt to the bustling streets of ancient Rome. We're talking togas, gladiatorial battles, emperors with god complexes, and a rather serious fellow named Vitruvius. No, he wasn't battling in the Colosseum. Well, probably not, but he definitely made a lasting mark on the world of architecture. You see, most of what we know about Roman building techniques and philosophies comes from Vitruvius. He was a military engineer and architect under Emperor Augustus, the guy who basically put the grand in the Roman Empire. But his biggest claim to fame isn't a specific building, it's a book, De Architectura, the 10 books on architecture. The Architect's Playbook. Think of De Architectura as the original DIY manual for building an empire. Vitruvius isn't just giving design tips, he's laying down the fundamental principles of good architecture. And for the Romans, always eager to flaunt their brilliance, this was kind of a big deal. So, what was on Vitruvius's architectural checklist? Let's dive in. Firmitas, utilitas, venustas. Or, in English, strength, usefulness, and beauty. This is the holy trinity of Vitruvian architecture. A building, he says, must be rock solid, serve its purpose well, and be pleasing to the eye. Proportion and order. The Romans loved things neat and orderly, and their architecture reflected that. Vitruvius talks about ideal body proportions and translates those ratios into how columns, doorways, and entire temples should be designed. It's math meets aesthetics, with a goal of harmony. The power of public space. Think forums, baths, basilicas. Romans were all about grand public spaces. Vitruvius writes extensively on their design, emphasizing convenience, functionality, and just the right dose of awe-inspiring scale to remind citizens who was in charge. Not just the buildings. Vitruvius was a total geek, in a good way. He dives into city planning, water systems, even military machinery design. To him, all of this was connected, all part of building the ideal Roman world. Beyond the blueprint, what's so cool about Vitruvius isn't just that he wrote the instructions. He made people think deeply about why buildings should look the way they do. It wasn't random, it was a reflection of values and ideals. Sure, some of his ideas seem a bit rigid to us now. But let's not forget this guy's world didn't have our fancy technology. He was problem-solving with the best knowledge available at the time, trying to create order and beauty in an often chaotic place. The Vitruvian Man. The idea, not just the drawing. You've probably seen the famous Da Vinci sketch of a guy in a circle and square. That's the Vitruvian Man. It's a direct reference to Vitruvius's writing on ideal human proportions. This image has come to symbolize a Renaissance ideal of the perfectly balanced human, which the Renaissance artists got excited about because their whole thing was reviving those ancient Roman ideals Vitruvius wrote about. See how it all connects? Rediscovery and ripples. Sadly, Vitruvius's work was mostly forgotten for centuries after the Roman Empire fell. But during the Renaissance, boom! His writings were rediscovered. Architects devoured his ideas about proportion, order, and the pursuit of ideal beauty. Look at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, the Palladian villas in Italy, even buildings here in the UK built in a classical style, like the British Museum. You're seeing echoes of Vitruvius in their stately columns and balanced forms. His influence spans centuries. A word of caution. Now, let's be honest, the Romans, for all their architectural genius, weren't always the nicest empire on the block. Their monuments could be as much about intimidation and propaganda as they were about pure beauty. Vitruvius's writing can feel rigid at times, emphasizing rules over individual expression. But what he gave us is incredibly valuable. He was one of the first to really put into words why architecture matters, how it connects to people, power, and the pursuit of a better, more ordered world. Architecture as philosophy. Vitruvius reminds us that architecture isn't just about putting up walls. It's about ideas, values, and how we choose to shape the spaces around us. And if that's not worth writing and reading a book about, I don't know what is.